Hey, welcome back. So I'm out on the Royal Enfield Super Meteor 650 once again, trying to get up to that magical 300 miles so I can get the first service over and done with. So I'm very much in that infamous running in period. Now then, for the Interceptor and the Continental GT, the running in advice is that for the first 300 miles you do not exceed 4,000 RPM. But there ain't no rev counter on the Super Meteor. No worries, no matter, you don't need them. Should be able to intuit the revs and know if you're pushing too hard for a bike that's not yet fully run in. However, as a general rule of thumb, a bit of a tip for you, this is what I do. I basically say to myself, no more than 10 mile an hour in first, 20 in second, 30 in third, 40 in fourth, 50 in fifth and 60 in sixth. And not a problem really, because all of these roads around these parts are largely national speed limit single carriageway, so that's 60 mile per hour. So you can easily achieve the national speed limit on single carriageway roads during the running period of any of the three motorcycles that currently bear the Royal Enfield 650 parallel twin engine. So if you just bear that in mind, you don't have to stick rigidly to the, shall we say, rather conservative guidance to be found in the handbook for these bikes. Because if you try and stick rigidly to that, I can promise you, you're going to have a pretty miserable time of it, particularly if you live in topography even, like this, because it's very, very hilly. So yeah, that's the sort of general rule of thumb that I use. So what I'm going to do now is we're going to have a ride into Masham. Yeah, so we're just going to have a ride into Masham via Kirkby, Malzeard and Grewelthorpe. Two nice little villages. But this is a spectacular ride. It's one of two options out of Pateley Bridge basically to get to Masham, the other one being over the tops and down into Leighton Reservoir. And then there's this one via Old Church Lane out of Pateley Bridge, Old Church Lane and over the tops here. Really spectacular, wild and woolly. Yeah, so did you see Uncle Stu's last couple of videos? One were on the apparent capitulation over some of the net zero measures and reversing policies that were never ever going to be policies. Actually, what a circus. Anyway, to a certain extent I agree with him. To a large extent I agree with him. But the one that I thought he'd really nailed his research on and articulated his point very convincingly indeed. Backed up with evidence, and that's the one thing with Stuart, isn't it? He'll always back up what he says with evidence and give you the relevant internet links so that you can check out the facts for yourself. So I've got to give him that. And yes, we're about the 20 mile an hour speed limits that have been imposed in Wales by the fella he calls the tin pot dictator, Mark Drakeford, First Minister of the Welsh Assembly. It's a devolved government in Wales. Those of you who are not watching from the United Kingdom or not overly familiar with the United Kingdom, for some years now the administration of Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland has been what they call devolved. They've all got their own devolved administrations. So if you're part of the Welsh government, part of their parliament's called the Senedd, and in Scotland it's the Scottish government there at Holyrood, and when it's operating, which it ain't currently, in Northern Ireland, the devolved administration there is at Stormont, and they basically sort of oversee and direct day-to-day operations and policy locally, whereas the English government is in fact the I suppose you could almost call it federal legislative oversight for the whole of the United Kingdom. Yeah, so that's how it maps out. So any road up, this here marked Drakeford, so what he's decided is, right, bollocks to it, he's thought, we're having 20-mile-an-hour limits in all the areas which were erstwhile 30-mile-an-hour, which is basically any non-rural route, any non-rural road by and large has a 30-mile-an-hour speed limit, because as Stuart pointed out, that strikes the best compromise between clogging up the free movement, such as it is, of road traffic, and preserving air quality and avoiding speed related accidents. And what got to me, I've said this before, bloody emotional blackmail. It pisses me off, not least because it's just treating us like naughty school kids, you know what I mean? Don't you dare do this, otherwise you could hurt somebody, and that would make you a very naughty, naughty boy indeed. Well, let me tell you, after 30 years of coppering and 2.5 years of that in road traffic, dealing with every kind of road accident under the sun that you can imagine, there's certain things that you come to realise. And one is that statistics are manipulated to some tune to try and justify a certain course of action. And it's the same with these speed limits. So they've come out, the Welsh government basically, and said, yeah, it's got to be 20 mile an hour, and shame on you for not agreeing with it, because that means people get seriously injured and die. Well, I'll tell you what, folk get seriously injured and die if they're hit at 10 mile an hour. And you can extrapolate arithmetically an argument that says at 30 mile an hour, so many are likely to get seriously injured, at 20 mile an hour, so many, 10 mile an hour, so many, and then put forward an argument. But the logical extension of that argument is that, right, why not drop it to 10 mile an hour then? You know, if it's all about the sanctity of human life and how precious it is, and how governments must stop at absolutely nothing in their efforts to reduce the number of road casualties, if that's your position, take it down to 10 mile an hour or 5 mile an hour. Do you know? But they're not going to do that, because obviously you slow down traffic to that extent, just about everything grinds to a halt. And with the vast majority of manufacturing and supply and the rest of it in this country depending on what's called just-in-time delivery, that would have a dramatic impact on the economy. So clearly a position is arrived at where a certain number of casualties on the road is acceptable in order to keep society moving along. So we've already made that decision. We made that decision when or governments made that decision when the 30 mile per hour limit was introduced. So it's a little bit disingenuous, isn't it, to suggest that your only motivation is this noble, unquestionable, unchallengeable notion that anything and everything can play out if it means that we're going to save lives. And when you say it like that, it sounds like an unassailable argument, but we know it's not true, don't we? So I think Stuart made some very good points there, and in fact pointed to some research that's been carried out on behalf of the UK government lately, which basically says that there's no evidence to support 20 mile an hour speed limits reducing the number of road casualties. So that be that. Now the other thing that I learned from the statistical side of dealing with road accidents as a traffic cop is when you've dealt with an injury accident, or this certainly was the case, you fill in a booklet called an RT35, and in that RT35 you tick off a number of boxes, and they were called causation factors. And you know, so your causation factor might be driver fatigue, committing a moving traffic offence, defective vehicle, poor weather conditions, poor road surface, that sort of thing. And that gets number crunched at the centre, and they come up with a statistical picture of what's behind the numbers attributable to road casualties, injury road accidents. So there is always that level of data capture. But when somebody comes along and says, oh, we've had this 20 mile an hour speed limit, or we've had this speed camera in place and it's reduced the number of casualties to before, those statistics are never ever adjusted for the other factors which have a significant influence upon reduction in road casualties. For example, more demanding driving tests, and therefore generally improved driver behaviour, changing public attitudes, things that are not acceptable now that were acceptable some time ago. We can all think of a few of those. Certainly increases in vehicle technology, improvements in brakes, in handling, in suspension, in in-car warning signals, such as, you know, your parking sensors and what have you. There are a whole host of other factors that come into play and play their part in reducing the number of road casualties, but the credit's always given to the speed cameras or the reduced speed limit. And they're not adjusted to take that into account. So yeah, it looks for all the world at this measure in Wales as just another means of getting people off the road, basically. Must think we're stupid if we don't get what's going on. Of course, the other thing that Stuart mentioned, quite rightly, and it's something I've touched upon several times before on this channel, is if you knock 10 mile an hour off the speed limit, you know, if you reduce the speed limit by a third, then all the traffic's going to spend longer on the road. And as he rightly pointed out, on a lot of manual gearbox cars, that means them being in third gear rather than fourth, which of course is less economical. So pound for pound, measure for measure, you reduce 30 mile an hour traffic to 20 mile an hour traffic, obviously it spends more time on the road, and it spends more time on the road being more inefficient. So another bit of logic that seems to have been overlooked. Conveniently so. Okay, I hope that was of some interest to you. If it was, please click a like, please click a subscribe. It makes all the difference, and feel free to share this video. If you'd like to see the video by Stuart Fillingham that I was referring to, I'll leave a link in the description below. Hope you enjoyed the ride over the moors from Pateley Bridge down through Kirkby Malzeard towards Grulthorpe and Masham. Give it a try, it's a cracker. So until the next time, thank you so much for watching this far, if indeed you have, and in the meantime, ride safe, be kind, and I'll catch you soon. Toodle pip.